Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the CNBC Africa Corporate Breakfast discussion. As some of you might know, we've been hosting these discussions for several weeks now on our social media platforms, but we decided to cater to those of you, of course, who still do enjoy the traditional forms of consuming your media, and that is on television. As many of you would have seen, just based on the advertising that had been going on before this discussion began, the topic today is artificial intelligence. And you do know that it is essentially being described as the new electricity by many people, in the sense that it is infusing everything that we do. And there's general consensus also that AI will disrupt every job and every task in its current form right now, whether you are a factory worker on the front line or even an office worker at your front desk. And so as more and more companies gravitate to adopting the innovations coming out of the AI scene, which of course are not abating, we're having a discussion on how they can simultaneously build a future workforce in which man and machine can coexist as opposed to being replaced by the other. And so we look forward to your thoughts on this. Feel free to reach out on CNBC Africa. We'll be monitoring the social platforms quite closely. We're also joined by an audience here in Johannesburg who will be weighing in on their thoughts on the topic at hand. But before I do introduce you to the panelists who will be leading this discussion for us, let's take a quick look at this scene setter.
Artificial intelligence is transforming the way we work, innovate, and compete. As AI automates routine tasks, enhances decision-making, and drives unprecedented efficiency, the challenge is clear. Those who embrace AI will gain a competitive edge, while those who resist change risk being obsolete. The key is for business, any business, to stay ahead in an AI-powered economy. So, how can one leverage AI for productivity, rethink its workforce skills, and ensure that AI-driven transformation remains inclusive while regulation plays a role?
All right, and so let's get into answering that very question right now. Introducing you, of course, to the panel who will be leading the discussion for us. Beginning with the gentleman on my far left, Sid Wahi, the Vice Chairman of the ABN Group, whose fantastic idea it was to host this discussion this morning. Good morning, Sid.
Thank you.
Also next to Sid, and a gentleman who got the memo of the fashion sense for today, Professor Letlhokwa George Mbedi, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, who's actually dressed in UJ colors, but yes. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning, people.
All right, and we also have seated next to me Mr. Christoph Newwood, the Chief Data and Analytics Officer over at FNB, who may be confused as a Sid's doppelganger, if you're not looking at his head, of course, just given the similarity in his attire, but nonetheless is a man in his own right. Good morning, sir. And online, joining us from New York, where it's 3 o'clock in the morning right now, we do have Otta Akigbe, Director of Partnerships and Programs of eHealth. Otta, good morning, still sort of slash good night from Monday. Thanks so much for joining. Okay, I'm sure our team are making sure that Otta can hear us, and we'll be going to Otta in just a short while. Sid, I'd like to begin with you, just given the fact that it was you who essentially convened us here as the host, being the ABN Group, but you're very passionate about this topic, and many people would know that who know you. I remember when you pioneered the introduction of the first artificial newsreader in Africa, I was scared for my job. I saw my employee within the company being numbered. 2 years later, I'm still here, but I'm also not ignorant of the fact that things have changed. Maybe let's just talk about the evolution of AI as it does pertain to the media landscape in which the ABN Group does exist, as well as education. But what have you seen? And maybe if we can also just talk about some of the tangible results that you've seen by way of productivity and efficiency gains.
Sure, absolutely. So firstly, thanks for having me. Absolute pleasure to be here. Look, I think the evolution has been phenomenal. The growth has been exponential in what's been happening ever since the first GPT models came out in sort of the early 2020s. But AI has been around for a really long time in different forms. So today we've been talking a lot about generative AI. but you had machine learning, computer vision, natural language processing as different technologies that have been growing and evolving over the last very many years. I know the first time I came across AI was when we were playing computer games back when I was a teenager, and we were talking about how good the AI was in computer games. So from where we were then to where we've come today has been a massive leap in terms of intelligence and autonomy. Specifically within the media space, I think that it really boils down to how you use these tools and implement them into your processes and workflows. So I can talk a little bit about what we've been doing as the ABN Group and as CNBC and Forbes Africa. I think from a cataloging and metadata enhancement point of view, there's some massive enhancements that we've been able to do. You know that if you've done an interview, let's say, with the finance minister in 2009, that's just sitting in your archives. It doesn't have any metadata that you could use to retrieve it and use it in your programming today. But now we've taken all those videos, about 30, 40,000 interviews that we've done, and we've converted them into vectors and stored them in a database. And I won't go into too many of the technical details. But now what we're able to do is retrieve content based on what was said and not what the title of the video was or what the other kind of superficial metadata was. So you spoke a little bit about the AI newsreader, and it doesn't pass the uncanny valley test, right? You can still see that it is artificial,
sure.
But that is quickly changing. We're seeing massive enhancements in advanced voice modes for these different tools, to the extent that people are having meaningful conversations with AI, more meaningful than they've had with actual human beings because of the programmed empathy into some of these systems. So it's pretty fascinating in terms of what's happening there. I think your last question on productivity gains and how that sort of works, look, I think it really boils down to, again, how you use these tools. What I will say is that we are in a place today where AI is not going to replace any of our staff. We're not going to replace jobs. What it is going to do is it's going to augment your ability. So why would you want to sit and do mundane tasks of data entry or mundane research, that sort of stuff? You could offload all of those workloads to AI and then focus on stuff that is uniquely human, that involves empathy, emotion, creativity,
sure.
Right? So I think that's kind of where we're at, and I don't think that there's going to be a massive disruption to certain jobs. But I will also contradict myself in saying that there are certain jobs that are going to get massively impacted.
Of course.
Like, for instance, in the software development industry. Now, I've been a hobbyist programmer for most of my life, and I'm at best an average or mediocre programmer. But with Copilot or with Cursor, which is a tool that integrates AI into the development environment, I've become a 10x developer.
Sure.
I can do amazing things in a fraction of the time using these tools. So if I was a software developer today, an entry-level junior programmer, I would be afraid.
So I was going to come to Prof. Mbedi, but I'm going to come to you, Chris, just given the fact that you are not a mediocre software programmer or AI specialist in the space at all. In fact, you were talking about the fact that AI has been around for a very, very long time. I think what happened recently with ChatGPT is that it just made it more consumer and front-facing and interchangeable for the everyday man in the street. But you did a PhD in AI back in the 1990s. You say. I mean, so just talk to us about that, because you're in banking right now, and Sid was talking about jobs that could be impacted. We do know that in banking, there's quite a lot of automation that is at risk or perhaps has already unfolded. I do know that from the conversations we have on CNBC talking to major banking bosses, very few of them are talking about opening new branches, a whole lot of new branches, and a whole lot new ATMs as there were perhaps 5-10 years ago. So talk to us about the evolution then that you've seen unfold in banking and financial services. And again, to the same question that I put to Sid, productivity and efficiency gains, have they been tangible?
Yeah, sure, Fifi. Okay, so I mean, just from my background, I did PhD basically in training neural networks for basically adaptive training for speech recognition purposes. But the technology has really transformed significantly from then. So back then it was very bespoke, narrow applications like speech recognition or image recognition. With deep learning, the ability came for these models to be able to recognize cats or dogs or images, video, etc. Reinforcement learning really added the ability for these models to improve themselves in ways that humans didn't expect. But I think the big change really has been with the generative AI over the last few years, because That has allowed us to take AI from being these specialist narrow applications to being very broad. So if you think about these large language models, they've really assimilated most of the human knowledge that people can get their hands on. With about 1 trillion parameters, that's human brain is still far ahead of that. You have maybe 100 to 1,000 times more synapses in your brain than these models have parameters, but they're using similar technology, neural network training technology that is mimicking what your human brain is doing. Now, what that has now allowed us is to plumb these into applications we hadn't had before. So we've always, let's say our customers do 3 billion payments a year, totaling 50 trillion across the group. We in FNB, we hold R1 trillion of deposits from our customers. We lend R750 billion in SA alone. All of that has been backed up by traditional AI. So that is in terms of rating models, fraud models, scoring every transaction, doing fraud checks and fin crime on every single transaction. That level of automation has already been in the system. What is happening now, and I would echo what Sid has said, is really where our human staff, so we have 40,000 staff in the group in SA, 50,000 in the group alone, giving them tools to make them much more productive is really what the aim is. But it's not as easy as just giving them a ChatGPT internal equivalent. You have to make the tools more embedded, you have to build them into their processes. So there is significant productivity gains, but they're evolutionary. So I do think that it is really about the willingness of staff and for other companies to adopt the technology. We all say AI won't take your job, but somebody using AI could take your job. So finding all of those bespoke families. I mean, mentioned developers. We have 4,500 people that are in IT in the group, and we actually have a huge IT backlog. We have so much stuff that we want to do that is not about having fewer people, but it's getting more out of them. We have 12,000 staff that are facing customers directly that we can enable so that they can answer emails much better with empathy, that is pulling all of the information about the customer from a CRM system, etc. Just make it much more efficient. The back office processes, things like the optical character recognition, and now with multimodal AI, the ability to get meaning from those is really where we can make back offices much more efficient and make those processes seamless to the customer, so they're not waiting overnight to see whether the documents are validated, etc. So it is evolutionary, and we do think that AI cannot replace a single person. It can't replace all the things you do. But some of the tasks you do, the menial tasks or whatever, we can certainly automate a lot of that and make you much more effective and work on higher value adding activities.
Okay, but no doubt there will be job losses. I mean, I recall there was a time back before anyone in this room was born that someone used to go around waking up the community with a very, very big clock knocking on doors, time to wake up. Right now we all use our alarm clocks, and one has to wonder the kind of invention that we're gonna have in there. So there will be replacement. And before we get into what the replacement is, Prof, let's just get your view. Interesting. Academia is one of the sectors in which we're told that we could have a net gain in jobs. Academia and agriculture stand to be corrected there, according to a report from the World Economic Forum. But maybe you can talk to us about what's happening at UJ. I mean, you guys have been cutting edge in terms of what you've been doing, your AI data center, or the AI curricula that you have also introduced into your programming. What's the latest, sir?
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. I mean, as an institution of higher learning, we recognize that we have an important role to play, in terms of firstly, making people aware of what this AI is all about. It shouldn't be a myth. I mean, we're the first university to launch a 3D concrete printing machine, a project that could print a low-cost house in a day. And many builders were upset with us, saying this machine is going to take our jobs. And I was the first to say, yes, it will, but it's also an opportunity. We mustn't look only at the door that is closing. We must look at the opportunities that are opening up, because, I mean, if that machine can print a house in a day, it means we'll need more plumbers, we'll need people to service the machine, and it's an opportunity to build more houses that are durable. So we see our role as an institution of higher learning being that of empowering people, showing opportunities. For example, we have a free massive open online course on AI in the 4th Industrial Revolution. If you have matric, you can do that program. It's not about high-level things that our colleague is doing, but you understand the basics, because that is the first part, so that people appreciate this. In terms of productivity, I mean, just for this academic year, we received around 700,000 applications for 10,900 seats. And you'll think UJ has got thousands of people managing this. No, we use AI, we use technologies, we respond around the clock, we have integrated WhatsApp and everything. We use facial recognition. You don't need to bring a copy of your ID. So it helps. Now, the people who used to do this type of mundane tasks, they have an opportunity to dream. They come up with amazing things to automate further and so on. Another important point that I need to emphasize is that of skills development, because we need to skill and reskill people so that they do not get lost. We need them to contribute meaningfully in the labor market. So using technology, you can use virtual reality and so on. At the University of Johannesburg, we use, we've got the Simulacrum sponsored by Sibanye Stillwater. I'm not marketing, but they are our trusted partners.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and you know what they're doing? Mining engineering students can learn to blast using that, augmented reality. And you can learn in a safe space where you go home still with your fingers, most importantly, your life. So we need to show that all of this can come together and so on. The other important thing that I need to emphasize, I'm a lawyer by training and something that I'm passionate about. And my colleague, Professor Chilitsi Moral, and I wrote this book, Artificial Intelligence and the Law.
Fantastic.
Because we need to make sure that the regulatory frameworks and ethical frameworks do not fall behind. So we need to make sure that, in as much as we embrace artificial intelligence and related technologies, we embrace them in an ethical manner. We ensure that employees still get fair wages, they still have their social security, and so on.
Okay, 2 points there, and I think the last one about law, regulation, very, very important. We'll park it for now because I also want to get into the first one that all of you raised, and it was around skills and training. Atta, I do believe that the technical crew are trying to get to you and obviously ensure that everything is okay from a sound point of view. We haven't forgotten you, and we certainly appreciate the fact that you are up at 3 o'clock in the morning in New York to partake in this discussion, and hopefully the technicals will come right shortly. But as we do await for Atta to join the discussion, let's just talk about the skills element, because all of you have told us that AI won't necessarily replace people, but AI will replace those people that don't use AI. So there's a certain individual that I happen to report to, signs off my checks and all of that for a salary point of view. And I've started experimenting with AI in terms of the consumer-facing tools. And every single time he needs assistance with something, he says, no, can you please ask your friend about X, Y, and Z? I'm not going to disclose him. But what I want to say, and the reason why I use that example is because it's an example of someone trying to learn how to use AI. And therefore, when we get into the skills argument, can we just talk about how that is supposed to unfold in terms of, is it supposed to be the individual who takes charge in learning to skill and upskill themselves within this realm? Is it corporates that perhaps also should be playing a sort of front of a role position in providing some of these training courses for us to upskill as individuals? Is it government who perhaps also needs to be providing the enabling environment to allow corporates to put more and more of their workers in accessing this AI infrastructure? Sid, your thoughts here?
Gosh, there's so much to unpack on this, but I mean, let's start with kind of like the baseline skills that you need. So I'm going to talk specifically about office jobs because vocational skills and other skills that you need, plumbers and so on that we spoke about are still very hands-on. But when it comes to general office skills, the baseline requirement is that you need to be proficient with basic computer literacy skills, right? So you're talking about like your Word, PowerPoint, and then based on which industry you're in, there's software proficiency in other areas. So whether you're using Salesforce or your Photoshop or whatever, I think that baseline proficiency is now going to change to being able to use generative AI. So when we're talking about AI in this context, again, it's generative AI. So something like prompt engineering. Now, a lot of times I have very senior people we speak to, they say that they're not getting the results that they want from Gen AI. And they've dismissed the tool saying that it doesn't work and it's just, whatever, it's garbage in, garbage out. The point there is you need to be able to know how to use it from a prompt engineering point of view, right? So what that means is essentially don't ask it to go from A to Z. You need to guide it from A to G and then M and then so on. So one of the things I use it for quite a bit is speech writing, and I'll say that openly and admit it, right? And some of my colleagues who know me are laughing at that. So what you generally need to do if you want to get a good result out of it is you need to give it the context, right? Context of who you are, what your style is, what you've done in the past. You need to give it instructions on what you want it to do, and then you need to keep iterating. So you can't just expect it to go again from A to Z, but you have to guide it through the process. Think of it as a very smart assistant with a very small short-term memory, right? So I think prompt engineering is really important, and how you get there is, I think, through language skills. So parents would encourage their children to study engineering and math and sciences. But guess what? Generative AI is really good at math, science, and very analytical and technical skills. So now I think we're going to see a rebirth of language skills being important again, where people are going to want to be able to articulate what they want to get out of these things. So to kind of summarize that point, it's really a different skill set on language, on being able to articulate what you want to do, and then a very good general knowledge of what it is that the systems are able to do. I think I'll stop there and let the other panelists give their
I think your point on prompting is very important, and I'll use the example from the Reserve Bank Governor of South Africa. And he once told us within a meeting to say that, as the Reserve Bank was also experimenting with AI, he tested a model, and he asked the model to write an obituary of Lesedi Kganyago. And the AI model, absolutely fantastic, accounted for where he was born, where he went to school, all his accolades and what he achieved, and said that Lesedi Kganyago is now dead. Of course, we know that the Reserve Bank Governor is not dead, but it speaks to the prompting, because the prompt was asked the AI to write an obituary, right? It just talks to the importance of putting in the right prompt to get the right result. Atta, I believe that you are now able to join us. Good morning from where you are. I mean, just to bring you up to speed to what we've been talking about, it's AI, of course, the use case, some of the productivity gains, tangible results that organizations have been seeing. We've spoken about academia, we've spoken about media, we've also touched on financial services, and I do know that you work in health specifically. Just your thoughts in terms of the evolution of this digital ecosystem, as it were, how it has unfolded, and what you think about where it's going.
Absolutely. Good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Fantastic. I can hear you clearly. I've actually been hearing you clearly. It's just been a struggle. But it's such a pleasure. It's been such an interesting conversation. And thank you for moderating it so excellently. I think my fellow panelists have already spoken very brilliantly. And just to add my own 2 cents, is just to say that AI is indeed a powerful tool. We know that. We've talked about it. The purpose of AI really is, when we look at it in the workplace, is to automate repetitive tasks. AI is not meant to take the work of strategic decision making, for example. But if we use AI properly in the workplace, what I have seen in terms of the evolving trend of AI is it helps us ease our time from doing those routine repetitive tasks, and then it frees employees to focus on more higher level work, work like problem solving, work like creativity, work like strategic decision making, which ideally AI should not replace. And I do think that taking advantage of that and taking the complementary quality of AI and merging it with that part of employee workflow is very, very important. I think one of the things I have seen businesses do, and which is something we need to do more of, is boosting productivity without displacing workers. Because just like you mentioned, a lot of workers are worried that AI, I mean, we also see some of the news tabloids that AI is going to take their work. But we can actually, as businesses, adopt a more human-centric approach, which means understanding that AI is there to enhance, not to replace human abilities. And when we look at our employees, that's really what the point is. So when we look at, just for me, reflecting on how AI has evolved over the years and how organizations can leverage it, and even looking at the title and the topic for today, I think one of the things that organizations need to do is to invest in upskilling their workforce. With more literacy around AI, there is less intimidation and there is more call to see the usefulness of this. And what it does and what organizations can do about this is just to foster a culture of continuous learning around how you do business, how you do your work. In the healthcare space, for example, how we develop and implement health interventions, and redesigning those roles to align the human expertise, like I mentioned, which is really around creativity, decision making, critical thinking, with the AI driven efficiencies. We all know that AI is highly intelligent, but then we can actually marry both. And we see that it's so critical to implement AI in a way that complements our existing workflows. From my space, which is the healthcare space, it is so important even in terms of public healthcare delivery. And you see that at the end of the day, we do ensure a smooth transition and it helps to minimize disruptions. So speaking more specifically, maybe talking about the healthcare space, for example, where we at eHealth Africa really just thrive, what we're doing is we're leveraging AI to improve healthcare delivery and optimize our solutions. We have a number of technologies that we have developed and that we are developing and deploying. And so putting AI in them streamlines the process. So very quick example before I cede the floor to the next panelist. We have a technology tool called Lumis, which is the logistics management information system, and we have a suite of this tool. And so what we're doing with AI is that we're using AI to forecast stock depletion rates in primary healthcare centers. And what it does is it prevents stockouts and overstocking at healthcare facilities. So we're not leaving that to human beings to do. Now, these are repetitive tasks, but tasks that are very critical. And then having AI respond to it very quickly really helps. And so what this approach does is that it ensures that AI augments the healthcare staff skills, allowing them to, and also even our staff who are doing the project support and program delivery, allowing us to focus more on innovation, more on the impact and the outcomes of the programs we're delivering, rather than the repetitive tasks of looking at stock in, stock out, that type of thing. I mean, it's just a very simple example, but I think just taking it into other businesses and other industries, when we prioritize workforce development and offer programs, even within our organization, like having peer-to-peer training, access to online platforms that leverage and educate more on AI, we focus on people first. We get them to understand that AI is not replacing you, but is enhancing you. We prioritize training alongside AI adoption. And I think that this way businesses can create a sustainable, more inclusive, and really just more productive future for everyone. So I would pause here now to cede the floor to another panelist. Thank you.
Arthur, thanks so much. And I'm so glad that we're finally able to connect with you. I mean, what you're saying, I think, is music to everyone's ears in terms of most people in the audience here, as well as those watching, I'm sure, in agreement with you. I mean, the people-first strategy, absolutely fantastic to hear. It's nice. It's a nice idealism, I would argue, because when we do reporting about what's happening in artificial intelligence, we hear about companies investing a host of rands and dollars in artificial intelligence. You don't hear the same companies often talking about investing in human intelligence, which we'll reflect on in this panel. But again, she's steered us down the whole of the investment in the workforce and skills development, which we were talking about before we took a short lift to New York, as it were. Chris, I mean, within financial services and banking, and I know that you look at the industry also at large, how seriously are organizations taking workforce development within the realms of AI?
Yeah, I'll separate maybe more into the technical training that needs to enable the AI that people use, and then the skilling of the workforce to be able to use the tools. So I think in FNB, we've got about 1,300 people, wider group, probably 1,800 people in data analytics. Of that, about 80 are now focusing purely on generative AI and agentic AI, and we see that number shifting, because that requires quite different skills. So I was very impressed with Sid with what he has managed to do. But I mean, I guess a lot of our staff, they're not Python programmers. They are not operating, for example, they don't know how to do cloud deployments. And we're running software across all three hyperscalers. So AWS, Azure, and GCP. So all of them have got their own nuances. There's the security in setting up private virtual cloud environments, extending our own data centers into these environments so that you can access the GPUs where all these smart and fancy models are running. Everybody knows NVIDIA, what's happened, the shortage of GPUs, etc. Accessing that compute facility, etc. Sometimes we have to get approval to run stuff in other regions. We've been running a lot of models now in Sweden. So we get legal assistance to know that we can run it. Okay, we've got Ireland, UK South, but there's a lot of technical things that need to happen to make this happen, the governance around it and all of that. So I think you've got to have some level of that in place to enable your organization, because you can't just let them say, well, use ChatGPT to do your stuff. If it's, you've got to have it, a control around it, etc. You've got to build the applications that are integrated into the staff's workflows, etc. So that is but that is really a bit of a tip of the iceberg. That's not that many people. What you then need to do is, I think the change management is quite a big thing. If you can embed it into the tools day to day, if it's already in your email and it's already suggesting answers, etc., or into your other workflows, it's automated, then it's pretty easy. But otherwise, you have to do quite a bit of change management to get people to use it. The tools, you're mentioning as well, you got to embed it into the IDEs. You've got to get the environment set up so that the developers it learns from their code, etc., in a protected way. That's quite a big change management that needs to happen. That's across basically all the functions in order to get that efficiency out. So I think while AI is pretty easy to give you some impressive answers, embedding it into the processes and doing the change management and the adoption is a slower process. So it hasn't, I think the biggest productivity benefits we haven't even seen yet. They are still actually on the way.
Prof. Mbedi, your thoughts here, maybe also just speaking about it from a South African context, where our unemployment situation is not getting better. It's not getting better, full stop. And now you've got artificial intelligence, and you've got real examples in which there has been a slowdown in job creation in certain industries with the adoption of AI tools. Just your thoughts. You wrote an opinion piece recently where you actually invited unions to be at the table in terms of also looking at the transparency of hiring practices and also workforce management. So when we do talk about the skills development of ordinary workers, but like me, maybe not you, what are your thoughts on how that process should unfold?
Thank you very much. Yes, one of my biggest concerns is that trade unions are not that visible in debates around these issues of AI and all these changes. I mean, trade unions played an important role in the first, second, and third industrial revolutions, and now they seem to be silent. I'm worried that many hard-won rights will be eroded and people will be more vulnerable. So they should be part of these discussions and also plans, in terms of how to reskill the workforce. In terms of high unemployment, I mean, there are so many opportunities. It's about how we partner and work together to empower people. I'll give you an example. The Johannesburg Business School at the University of Johannesburg has got a program where one of our top professors in this space brought together, with the support of generous donors, a group of youngsters, to learn how to code and do all those things. As soon as they are done, when they graduate, those guys get employed, immediately, and they are paid some nice salaries that even people who just graduated with degrees, don't earn, So there are opportunities, By that, I'm calling for a partnership approach where, institutions that need this type of talent can partner with institutions of higher learning and provide these much needed skills. Earlier on, you asked a question about who's responsible for this skilling, reskilling. I would say this is a multi-actor responsibility. We all have a role to play. The government has a role to play. Us as institutions of higher learning have a role to play. And everyone. We must not forget individuals. I mean, today, there are so many free programs or courses out there that one can take. One must just have the burning desire to learn new skills and distinguish himself or herself from others in the labor market. We at the University of Johannesburg, as I mentioned earlier, have got this free, massive open online course that we require all our students to take, including staff, because we want them to distinguish themselves. If you study law, we want you to understand the issues around AI. And as a result, we see various faculties doing amazing things in their own spaces to show people out there that it's possible. This is the path we should take. The last point I would like to make is that, of course, the government has to play an important role in making sure that the resources are available. These things, you may have them out there, but if you have poor connectivity, we need to make sure that this digital divide is addressed. You can have all these opportunities, but if people can log in, can connect, can access this, or you have to wait, for things to connect for hours, then we'll be left behind.
Sure. I mean, the speaks to the broader discussion around digital infrastructure. And we had the CEO of the MTN Group in Rwanda just speaking about this exact space at the Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit just last week. And there, I think it's the industry waiting for perhaps government to lead the way in a better manner for the private sector to follow suit. Otta, just to bring you back, we are just, I think, wrapping up the discussion around skills and how it's unfolding in the space. I imagine that you would have monitored some of the recent headlines coming out of the tech industry. And it is interesting that we are seeing the tech industry actually playing its part in providing skills that they will need to power their own systems. Just last week, we heard that Microsoft was making a really big investment here in South Africa by way of the data centers and the cloud infrastructure as well as skills development. This followed a sort of similar investments that we have seen in the recent while from AWS, which opened a skills center in Cape Town, regarded by some people's standard as one of the best cities in the world, but also the likes of Oracle, a tech player in the space, which has also been doing quite a bit of stuff and also not giving them free advertising, but just noting what incumbents are doing in the space. But you sit in New York right now, and you also have your eye on Africa. Maybe you can just tell us about what you are seeing by way of the scaling up of skills. We often hear on the continent that we're behind in terms of what's happening in the rest of the world. Is that what you see speaking from the rest of the world right now?
Thank you very much for that. I mean, I think right now we all know that we are actually in an AI-driven world. It's inevitable. It's here. It's booming in Africa. I'm actually based in Africa. I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria, but just here briefly for something. And so what I would just say, starting to answer the question, is that to thrive in this AI-driven world that we're in, whether in Africa or whether in the other parts of the world, I think it starts with professionals. I think one of the panelists talked about what professionals can do. And I do think that professionals need a technical, analytical, and adaptive skills mindsets, most importantly, along with a growth-oriented mindset to be able to thrive in this AI-driven world, as well as when you combine it with upskilling, because upskilling is a responsibility of the professional as well as the organization and the community at large. So first, I would say that digital literacy and data fluency are critical. Just basically understanding how AI works. And like some of us have been very intimidated about it over time, but we see that it's really not as complicated as we think it is once we have an understanding of how it works. So, understanding how it works, its capabilities, its limitations, that would really enable professionals to harness its potential effectively and be able to upskill with whatever support that comes their way. I think critical thinking and problem solving remain valuable. And I have seen this at play in Africa and around the world. I think we see individuals that are really understanding that part of them and then just using AI to enhance their decision making. But I found that it still requires human oversight. It still requires our own critical thinking to be able to interpret the insights that we're getting from AI, address the biases, because in any case, when we talk about biases with AI, sometimes they come as a result of whatever it is we feed it, and also make ethical judgment. So I think very importantly, when it comes to upskilling and also looking at this from a global lens, is understanding that creativity and innovation would always take center stage. As like I mentioned when I was speaking earlier, as AI automates routine tasks, it frees up professionals, it frees up individuals for more complex problem solving, more strategic thinking. And then what I understand is once we have that adaptability and lifelong learning mindset, it is very essential because, like the panelists have talked about, the rapid evolution of AI demands that continuous upskilling, demands that continuous willingness to embrace change. Soft skills, emotional intelligence can never go out of order. We have to keep building our emotional intelligence. Professionals need to keep upskilling in this area. collaboration between technical and non-technical teams is very important. Ethical awareness, so that we're doing this AI thing and using these AI tools properly. Ensure that AI-driven workplaces will continue to remain inclusive, continue to remain human-centered, continue to remain effective. So I think for me, just to wrap up before I cede the floor, is to say that organizations need to recognize that an AI-driven future requires proactive workforce development very intentionally. I mean, just to speak a bit around what we are doing is putting a lot of emphasis on that capacity building around upskilling. So encouraging our staff to cultivate a growth mindset in the way we do everyday operations, even in the way we do more strategic thinking. We have structured learning programs, specialized AI and data analytics training, and also in-house capacity building sessions. And these are things that every organization can do and put in place for their organizations. So this will help them with new skills through online resources. Someone talked about free resources that are available, which is true. Online research, even having events like tech meetups to be able to demystify some of the things around AI that people are intimidated about, where we get to discuss the latest AI trends. I think putting all of that together, I would say fostering that culture of continuous learning, equipping our teams with AI literacy, and just ensuring that they understand that they remain at the forefront of the technological advancements. I think that is a really big one, understanding that AI is truly here to enhance their work, not necessarily to replace them. I think that is something that we're going to use to leverage AI to enhance. For example, in the public health space, there's so much we can talk about, but for want of time, to enhance public health solutions, to drive productivity in the public health space, and also looking into the future. How do we incorporate more machine learning and AI into some of the initiatives that we're rolling out? So I think I would pause here for now. Thank you.
And I mean, when you talk about creativity and strategic thinking and decision making, I've also been quite surprised at seeing how proficient a lot of these AI models have become in this regard. And also, I mean, you see them designing logos and also pimping up various texts in terms of adding the color and the nuances of creativity. As was mentioned, it's used as for speech writing in some corners. But one also has to wonder to what degree using and overusing these tools will sort of make human beings a little bit more complacent. I mean, you're talking about freeing up time to dream. Dream, about what at this present moment in time when you've got these tools that are doing quite a bit of the work for you? Prof, before we go down the whole of law and governance and regulation, I thought maybe just to open it up to the floor. Any thoughts in that regard? Okay, we've got a question that has, or a hand that's come up quite quickly. Please keep it up, the mic is coming to you. And just maybe if others can indicate if there's any questions or comments that they'd also like to make in this regard. Okay, there's two.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the conversation so far. Very quick one. My name is Sabelo from MLX Ventures. The discussion so far has been about pretty much generative AI, automation, and the like. But I'd like to find out your thoughts very specifically about a seemingly controversial statement by Sam Altman, who had said, because we're in the age of agentic AI, of course, I have to punch one of our portfolio companies that build autonomous agents this way inclined, and clearly with non-deterministic reasoning capabilities. Those autonomous agents will allow, according to Sam, for the creation of the first solopreneur unicorn company. Isn't that something that is actually quite scary, which means then a lot of said tasks that are, I suppose, augmented, as a lot of people have alluded to, can fully be automated? What are your thoughts thereof? And are there any, I suppose, ways to actually address the rise of agentic swarms, as they call it?
That is a man who is certainly embedded in the field. Any thoughts? Any takers here? Yeah, Chris?
Maybe on Agentic AI, I mean, that is clearly the revolution of 2025, is the switch over from the traditional use of generative AI that can summarize documents, that can write something for you, that can give you opinions and stuff, to something that is more automated and it's got some level of decisioning. I do think that it is an evolution. I'm not sure. I mean, there's always been the proponents of, what will happen at the end when we have artificial general intelligence and so on. And I think it's really hard to speculate on that. But I think what is clearly now happening is that even the results from your AI models now if they reflect on what they're doing, if they do some research and they actually look at all the documents and they reflect on the accuracy of the answers. So we would have bots that are looking at the replies from the first bot, send it for correction, get it back, then your results improve markedly. So that kind of switch over from the just traditional one-shot answers is absolutely happening, and that improves the quality significantly. It does make these things much smarter in a way that they can automate some tasks that are multi-stage. We don't think yet that it is at that level where, I think clearly there is a risk if one actually gives these models full autonomy, but that's not really in the realm of where we are. But I just want to say that clearly agentic AI AI agents is really what is driving then the next level of actual productivity gains. Because it's one thing to be able to find information easily, and that is fantastic. But the ability of it to actually, let's say, to write code and then run the code and then check whether it works, etc., with some test cases before it gives you some code to look at. So those are all the kind of improvements that are clearly happening, and that will make these models, significantly more functional. I'd not go into where it's going to replace people. I do think that just when we look at in South Africa, specifically in Africa, productivity doesn't actually lose jobs. The most productive economies in the world, the US and China, the ones that use the most technology, have got pretty close to the lowest unemployment on the planet, because productivity begets investment in doing more of that, and that it drives demand, it lowers the price of goods, it makes the market efficient. So I think in South Africa, it would be a really bad thing if we thought that this was a threat and we should just control it, as opposed to saying that it really gives us an opportunity to increase the level of production significantly. And I think not all of that will show up in GDP numbers. There's economic arguments around the way that GDP is measured. Will it actually show all the quality that you're getting in from the fact that you're listening to songs that are now mixed by an AI, that maybe even songs are created or movies are created or content's created for you, or you're going to read books that are written just for you on a one-time use, etc. I think that kind of value, that's what the world is going to get, because that's what people want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So essentially a world of a Will Smith's I Am Robot, where machines eventually take over everything.
No,
it's
I'm not quite
one
there.
that,
I'm not quite
okay,
there.
Okay, I see.
I hope that's not what I said.
No, that's not what you said. I'm just saying that you're saying that we don't need to be worried about that just for now, hopefully.
Yes.
Does anyone else have thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I think I want to just unpack what he said in a little bit and then kind of try and answer that. So he was talking about solopreneurs and agentic AI. So if I had to just imagine what that would look like is, and just to build on what Christoph said, is you have multiple agents doing different tasks. Let's take an example. Let's say you were to start a lemonade stand, right? So you now need to do marketing, you need to do account reconciliation, right? And you have to also manufacture the lemonade. So I can see how all these things can be done agentically with actual robots and that sort of thing. So the biggest challenge though is that I would not trust any of these processes without a human in the loop, because we're not at that point where you're going to get 100% kind of continuous and stable results from these processes. Anybody who's used non-deterministic AI repeatedly has seen that there becomes a deterioration in output after the context windows have been exhausted. That's a bit of technical jargon for saying that we're not there yet, but I can absolutely see that we would get to a point there. In fact, I've had this thought for a long time that businesses are increasingly becoming black boxes where it's input, it's basically, you don't know how they're working. AI itself, we don't really know how it works in terms of these LLMs. So I can see 5-10 years down the line where a lot of the tasks we're talking about today, where humans are still involved, could be replaced by artificial general intelligence, AGI, and that sort of thing. And to just do a little bit of fear mongering and even take it a step further.
You already did.
I can also see a path to a Terminator type existence where the machines take over and they realize that human beings aren't really necessary. So it's, just to be a little bit frivolous there, but yeah, I can absolutely see how we could get to a very dystopian future if guardrails are not placed today.
But I think if we stick to that example, I believe it's the part human who always said, "I'll be back." And I think that we can apply the same for a human as well. So I'm coming to you. There's just a gentleman there at the back also who has a question.
Hi. Hello. So my name is Ritesh from Augmented AI. This is more about the education space. So we've seen the trend of like Udemy, edX, Chegg, all of this stock prices just plummet. Since 2021, it's a very distinct downtrend. So I just want to find out, humans are becoming more instant gratification, and we want things right there and there. And if you want to learn coding, why learn coding? You can just ask ChatGPT to give you the code for that. And I just want to find out, like, how other universities, right now they're still protected because there's a piece of paper, your certificate, to say, you know what you are talking about, you're qualified, and thus you can get a job, But how are universities eventually going to evolve with AI and help the students with AI? So I just want to get your opinion on that.
Prof, I think this was one for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, what you're saying is extremely important. That's why we're currently working with partner institutions, to come up with ways where one can choose and pick, in terms of what you want to study. I mean, I studied law. There are some modules when I look back, I said, hell, I didn't need this. So the future, the way I see it, is a situation where you'd say, I'm interested in this and that, and put it together and go and do what you want. That's why today we are looking at ways in which we could stack things, short learning programs and so on, and go and work and come back for more, that type of thing. But I don't think, the need for full qualifications, like your full degrees, I don't think that will be eroded anytime soon. The other opportunity is people who don't want to come and hang around on a brick and mortar, campus, in inverted commas. That's why at the University of Johannesburg soon, watch this space, we'll be launching what we call UJ Digital, where you can have the full experience, but virtually. And when I say full experience, I mean it. There will be virtual spaces to hang out, meet people, engage, get counseling should you feel overwhelmed, and so on. We feel that we need that balance. For those that don't want to walk around on campus, they can get that opportunity. And then you can break, your studies in terms of what you need, and leave those things that you may not be interested in. I think that is the future.
Okay. There is... All right, okay. And then just the last one in the front, please, dear Bald. Oh, and the last two in the front.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Amber Williams from Empire Partner Foundation and EPF AI Campus. My question just goes back to our dystopian discussion and solopreneurs and automating decision-making within AI. What do you think, going back to the professor and the book that he mentioned earlier, are the guidelines or the governance that needs to now be in place to make sure that, because I don't think, looking at the evolvement of AI and robotics in the last 10 to 5 years, that acceleration and that it's been catalyzed, and I don't think now with generative AI improving itself, that's going to slow down by any rate. So what are who are the governing bodies, number one, and what are the governance that needs to be put in place to ensure that ethical evolution?
Prof, is this what you unpack in the book?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I mean, the reason Prof. Moral and I wrote this book is because I'm a lawyer by training. We had lots of debates. He's an engineer, and I was saying, yeah, but we need to regulate these things, The biggest challenge is that AI, to me, is like fire. You can harness it nicely and cook and enjoy sumptuous meals, but then it can also burn one, So we need to balance that. We need to appreciate that. The problem with the law is that the law is reactive. And if we wait for the law, then we won't have all this innovation. So we need a balanced approach. In terms of who, that is also a worrying thing, because this can be regulated at different levels, at national level, regional level, and global level.
Isn't there that presidential Fourth Industrial Revolution Committee? I mean, would a body like that not be one that steers in this way?
Yes. A report was published, recommendations were made in terms of various laws that needed to be amended and improved. But things are moving at a slow pace, you know. I mean, you wait for Parliament to see it, which is the right way, and so on. The biggest challenge at a national level, and with all due respect, is that the people who should come with these policies, many of them do not even understand what AI is. So we need to start by empowering them. And at a regional level, we also need those protocols, and globally. So in our book, we have a chapter on autonomous weapons. You know, the possibility of having rogue AI agents is real. So we're saying we need to have regulatory frameworks at a multilateral level in terms of what would be acceptable, what would be morally right, what would be ethical, and operate within that space. I mean, human or man in the loop is one of those where we need to be clear on that. Let's go back to the world of work. I mean, wearables, you know, we have smart watches and everything. They check our temperature. They can be used to enhance productivity, but they can also be abused by employers, where they are used, you know, to violate employment rights and so on. So we need to be clear about the boundaries. What is acceptable? What are the limits? And, you know, the line that we should not cross. For example, personal information, you know, privacy must be respected. If we don't do that, we run a risk of people being on the clock 24/7, which is a situation now. That's why I say it's also important to have everyone who should play a role, play their role. Take trade unions. Elsewhere in the world, people have now the right to be left alone after hours. Because if you don't have such a right, you may feel obliged to continue checking your watch, checking your phone, checking your laptop. When do you rest? Those hard-won rights, you know, to rest and so on will be lost. So it's a balancing act. Sure. We all have a role to play.
Sure. Just in the interest of time, we've got around 2.5 or 3 minutes left for the formal broadcasting. Then we're going to have pay our bills. You guys know how tough it is in the media industry right now. But the conversation will definitely continue when we are shifted off the virtual space and the television space that we're on. And so, Arta, just to make sure that we get one last thought from you for the official broadcasting, any parting shots, just you know, having heard what some of the audience members have been asking in the room and also what your colleagues of the panel have said.
Thank you. I think my parting words will just be talking about how do we not get left behind given the advancements in AI. And this is really just focused at companies. And I think that companies, whether big or small, startups, you know, existing companies for a while, must adopt a proactive, strategic approach and intentionally integrate AI into their core operations. I know that it's not a walk in the park, but it's something that we can start little by little and make it be part of our business as usual. And also, very importantly, is not enforcing, but facilitating and enabling and encouraging a culture of continuous learning and innovation. So I think, you know, most organizations like ours have already taken this approach, recognizing the benefits of becoming AI-driven as an organization, knowing that AI can be our partner on this journey. So I think it's important that organizations invest in AI literacy. It shouldn't just be a buzzword. Organizations should invest in upskilling programs through internal training, taking advantage of affordable, not necessarily expensive platforms, even having some type of peer-to-peer networking in the organization with the tech teams, just to ensure that staff are equipped with the skills needed to work alongside AI. Because when we talk about productivity, we do know that the organization is very important in leading that charge. So I think some of the upskilling will be around upskilling their technical expertise, critical thinking, data analysis, and most importantly, adaptability. So I will stop here just for the want of time. Thank you.
Arta, thanks so much for that. Valuable insights indeed. And I think just summating the crux of what we're talking about here, how to leverage all these efficiencies and benefits that have come with artificial intelligence and ensuring that you do so in a manner that does not leave anyone behind. A wonderful analogy, Prof. Mbedi, placed by yourself in terms of describing AI as fire that, of course, can keep you warm and can help cook the food that you need to nourish you as a system, but also can burn you if not properly regulated. And it is about trying to find that balancing act of how to to contain the fire while using the benefits of the fire. I think I'd say that it's a multi-stakeholder intervention that does need to be put in place. Yes, as individuals, we do need to be taking advantage of a lot of the free courses that are out there and that companies are offering for us to upskill and learn a little bit more. I think we should be curious-minded. Lifelong learning is something that has been mentioned quite repeatedly in the panel, asking those who are presently in the know to know how to better use these tools. I think that employers as well have got a very, very big responsibility in ensuring that their workforce do keep up to date with the trends. Offering access to some of these courses, and particularly courses that might require a paid-for element to ensure that they've got a workforce that is competitive for the future. Government, absolutely critical, because for employers to be able to afford some of these interventions, they do need to be operating in an economy that is growing and an economy that is thriving. Government policy certainly needing to ensure that investments can be made in this regard and that the right regulation is also followed suit. It is a complex and an ongoing discussion that we can have around this, but unfortunately the official time for this discussion has come to an end right now. Thanks once again for tuning in. Thank you so much to the panelists for their insights, and thank you so much to the physical audience members here for sharing their comments as well. We will wrap it up for now and certainly see you soon. Goodbye.